Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you'd like to submit a story, feel free to do so in the comments down below, or send it to my email. Alright, let's dive into today's story now. My eyes wandered across the device in James's downtown garage. Various metal tubes, dials, and glowing canisters of strange liquid were spread over the surface. "It's perfectly safe," James exclaimed. I shook my head. "You're insane. There's no chance I'm getting on that thing." James sighed, setting down the wrench he was holding. The front of the device looked like an airplane with the top surface stripped away, revealing incredibly complex machinery with bundles of wires woven through it. I didn't understand how it worked, but I knew some of the components were radioactive. James climbed into one of the chairs mounted in the center of the device. He had built it with 2 seats because why not? He patted the empty seat next to him, which looked like it had been ripped from an airplane. "Come on, man. We always talked about this," he said, grinning through his unkempt beard. "That was a joke, dude. I didn't think you'd actually build a time machine." James shook his head. "Temporal displacement device. Same thing." "No, they are completely different things." "I really doubt that." I climbed into the chair beside him as James passed me a blue seatbelt with a silver clip. "Okay, I have to ask, did you get these seats from an airplane?" He nodded. "Yeah, why?" "Great, just great. No reason." "So, how will we know it's working?" James slid a pair of goggles over his face and passed me an identical set. "What are these for?" I asked. "So your eyes don't fly out of your head," he replied. "That's a possibility?" I shouted. "Maybe." "I don't know, man. I've never done this before." "Wow, I never would have guessed." I buckled the seatbelt and spent the next few minutes questioning every single one of my life choices. James pressed switches and pulled levers across the incredibly complex and haphazard dashboard in front of us. I really feel like there should be walls or something. Even just glass would be nice. "Okay, hold on." I looked around and saw nothing that looked safe to grip. Even the armrests on the airline seats were missing. "Hold on to what?" I asked. James pulled one more large lever to his left. Everything melted into swirling colors, then bands of light. The device rattled and sputtered as steam shot from several exhaust pipes to my right. "Is it working?" I shouted. My words came out all wrong. It was almost like they were out of order. Did I just speak backward? The bands of light stretched across my field of view, rotating around like a kaleidoscope. An overwhelming force slammed my head back into the seat. I felt no wind, but I could tell we were moving. My skin stretched across my face until it felt like it would tear right off my skull. In a flash, everything went back to normal. Well, as normal as suddenly being on a beach could be. "This isn't James's garage." James stripped off his goggles and shrieked with delight. "It worked. Holy shit, it worked." I took off my goggles, surveying the area around us. "Why do you sound so surprised?" I asked. My eyes scanned the beach. It was deserted. Not a soul in sight. The border of a thick forest stretched in both directions to my right. To the left, an endless ocean stretched out into the horizon. "So, how far back did we go?" I asked. James stood in front of the device, his hands on his hips. He adjusted his glasses on his face. I knew that look. "What's wrong?" I asked. "It's nothing," James replied. "Don't lie to me, dude." Before James could respond, an earth-shaking roar cut through the relative silence. We both turned toward the sound and watched as the treetops swayed without any wind to move them. "Kinda reminds me of Dinosaur Park. You know, that one movie?" "Yes, I know the movie." "Did you send us back 65 million years?" I asked. A woman with fiery red hair dressed in animal furs exploded out from the forest and began sprinting toward us. She was at least 7 feet tall and incredibly muscular. I wasn't sure what scared me more, her or the thing chasing her. When I saw a Tyrannosaurus Rex emerge from the tree line, I had my answer. "That's a fucking dinosaur," I shouted. I looked back to James, who was repeatedly kicking the front of the machine. "We need to go now," I said. "I'm aware. Just give me a second." He just kept kicking the damn thing. "Are you seriously expecting that to work?" I asked. James nodded, speaking between impacts. "It just needs a little love." With that last kick, the machine sputtered to life. He climbed into the seat beside me and put on his seatbelt. I did the same, sliding the goggles over my head. The ground shook beneath us as the T-Rex closed the distance. "We're running out of time, man." James furiously pulled levers and flipped switches. I looked back to check on the T-Rex as the red-headed woman leaped onto the machine. She gripped the side with white knuckles as James pulled the last lever to his left, and everything melted into a blur once more. "Wait!" I shouted. The word came out backward. I went through the entire ordeal again, only for us to return to what looked like James's garage. The last time I had been that happy to see a room full of tools was at my high school reunion. I unbuckled myself and fell out of the chair, kissing the no doubt filthy ground beneath the machine. "Holy shit, I'm so glad we made it back," I said, climbing back onto my feet. Dude, who the hell is she?" James asked. I turned around and saw the red-headed woman standing beside the machine. Her green eyes were wide as she scanned the room. She mumbled to herself, using words that made no sense to me whatsoever. "Hey, it's okay. We're not going to hurt you," I said, holding up my hands. Her face scrunched with confusion as she hit the back corner and spun around to face the wall. I couldn't imagine what was going through her head. "Did we bring someone back with us?" James asked. "Unless you have a girlfriend that lifts weights and dresses like she's from the Flintstones, then yes." "James, we brought someone back. What the hell are we going to do?" he asked. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to catch my breath. I felt like I was going to pass out. My stomach was turning end over end. "I need some air. Just watch her," I said, walking toward the door on the opposite side of the room. I stepped through into the outside world. For once, I was grateful for the smell of smog and the cacophony of a busy city. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. As I watched the cars driving by, my eyes narrowed as I saw a car go by that I didn't recognize. The logo was unfamiliar to me too. What the hell is a Tesla? I started noticing other things that weren't quite right. Billboards for companies I had never heard of. Businesses on James's street that weren't there when we left. I ran back inside. James was staring down at his phone, his eyes wide. The red-headed woman was over by the machine. She reached out with a finger to touch it, but recoiled in fear before making contact. "James, I think something's wrong," I said. James nodded. "Yeah, you should look at this." He turned his phone around and showed me a news article. It was the result of a presidential election. The winner was a washed-up reality TV celebrity who had fallen out of the limelight long ago. I would have recognized that shitty hair and orange skin anywhere. "No fucking way," I said. James nodded. "Yeah, we're definitely not in the right timeline." "Oh, really, you think?" I looked over to see the red-headed woman holding a red gasoline canister. "Just get the machine fixed so we can get her back home and get ourselves back to the right timeline," I said. Yeah, about that." I grabbed the canister out of her hands. She growled at me like an angry dog. I wasn't sure how to react, but I shot James an angry look. "What is it?" I asked. James tried to feign a laugh. "We're out of fuel." "Okay, so how do we get more?" I asked. James stared down at his phone. "Well, the military base where I got the fuel from the first time has a different name in this timeline. The location's the same, though." "Okay, what's it called?" I asked. James turned his phone back to face me. "What the hell is Area 51? The Dyatlov Pass Occurrence, 1959, Russia. A gathering of 9 experienced climbers strangely died in the Ural Mountains. Their tent was seen as torn from within, and their bodies showed odd wounds, including squashed bones and missing tongues. Some were tracked down shoeless in the snow, and radiation was identified on their garments. Right up till now, nobody knows precisely very thing occurred. The Yuba Area 5, 1978, California, USA. 5 men evaporated after a ball game. Months after the fact, their bodies were viewed as in a far-off frigid woodland. One had made do for quite a long time in a lodge, yet notwithstanding approaching food and fuel, he strangely starved to death. Nobody knows why they were there, or the way that they wound up so somewhere down in the wild. The missing skiers of Mount Glastonbury, 1940s, Vermont, USA. A few skiers and climbers evaporated in the purported Bennington Triangle. One case included a man who vanished while skiing with companions. His tracks finished unexpectedly in the snow. Regardless of broad quests, no indication of him was at any point found. The Sauter Kids vanishing, 1945, West Virginia, USA. On Christmas Eve, a house fire consumed the Sauter family's home, yet 5 kids' bodies were never tracked down in the rubble. In spite of the fire evidently consuming for a really long time, there were no remaining parts. Many years after the fact, weird sightings of the youngsters were accounted for, proposing they had been captured. The snowstorm of 1972, Iran, quite possibly of the deadliest snowstorm in history, covered whole towns under 26 feet of snow, killing more than 4,000 individuals. Heroes later found whole networks frozen strong, as though time had halted in a moment. Some professed to see bizarre figures strolling in the tempest. The Ghost of the Snow, the Frozen North, USA. A lady in a distant Alaskan town detailed hearing voices calling her into a blizzard. She opposed, yet later tracked down monstrous, human-like impressions outside her lodge. Local people accepted it was the kalupalik, an animal from Inuit legend that baits individuals to their demises. The Isdal Lady, 1970, Norway. A lady's scorched body was tracked down in a far-off blanketed valley. Her fingerprints were taken out, her personality eradicated, and her things contained enigmatic notes. Agents tracked down various phony international IDs and proof of undercover work. However, her actual character stays obscure. The Frozen Man of Minnesota, 1980, USA. Gene Hilliard, a 19-year-old, was found frozen strong in freezing temperatures subsequent to being abandoned for the time being. Marvelously, she made do and completely recuperated, bewildering specialists who couldn't make sense of how her body worked after outrageous frostbite. The Lake Bodom Murders, 1960, Finland. 4 teens setting up camp by a frozen lake were ruthlessly gone after in their tent. 3 were killed, and the last one standing experienced a blackout. The executioner was rarely gotten, and many years after the fact, the survivor himself was accused of the wrongdoing, however later cleared. The Phantom Snowmobiler of Canada. A few voyagers in country Canada have revealed seeing a spooky snowmobiler who shows up out of nowhere on frosty streets prior to evaporating like a phantom. Some say he's the soul of a man who stuck to death after his snowmobile separated, perpetually attempting to view as his way home. The room that was not there. At midnight, the door appears, and the room is always hungry. It started with a door. Harold and Lisa had lived in the house for years, long enough to memorize every squeaky floorboard and every creak of the old wooden walls. But one night, at precisely midnight, a door appeared where there had been none. Lisa had been asleep when the sound of metal clicking open woke her. Not a knock, not footsteps, just a click, like the delicate snapping of a bone. She sat up, heart pounding. The sound had come from the hallway. Harold was snoring beside her, oblivious. She stepped into the dark, feeling her way along the wall, and then she saw it, a door, jet black, Its knob rusted and slick, as if it had been sweating something thick. It pulsed, just slightly, as though it had lungs. It was open. Beyond the threshold was a room that was growing. At first, it was no bigger than a closet, but alive. The walls glimmered, coated in a filmy layer of something viscous, like the inside of an animal's stomach. The air was thick, wet, hot as breath. Then she saw the teeth. They weren't set in mouths, but stitched into the walls, rows upon rows of rotting, splintered human teeth, chattering, grinding against each other. The floor swelled, quivered beneath her like muscle stretched too tight. She slammed the door shut. She shook Harold awake, babbling about the impossible. But when they checked again in the morning, the door was gone. Yet the next night, at the stroke of midnight, it returned, and the room was bigger. Harold stepped inside this time. The walls shuddered, the sound of wet flesh peeling apart as something peeled itself from the surface. A hand. No, many hands. Too many fingers, their skin sloughing off in ribbons. They reached, grasping, digging into Harold's arms, nails like shards of glass piercing deep, pulling him forward. A scream, his scream, echoed through the chamber as the floor split beneath him. Lisa watched in horror as flesh-colored tendrils, veins, nerves, pieces of people whipped up from the pit below, wrapping around Harold's neck, his torso, his mouth. He tried to cry out, but the tendrils forced their way in, burrowing into his throat, through his eyes, slipping beneath his skin. His flesh boiled, his bones snapping like twigs inside his own body. His limbs jerked violently, his ribs splintering outward, cracking through his chest like broken fingers. And then, he was gone, swallowed. The door slammed shut. The next morning, Lisa woke up alone. Harold was never there. His clothes were gone, his scent erased, his photos missing from the frames. She was alone in a house that did not remember him. But when midnight approached, she sat up, shaking, waiting. Click. The door was back, and the room had grown bigger. It started when Ms. Castor joined our school, halfway through the fall semester. She had an air of mystery about her, with her long black hair, always perfectly in place, and those sharp green eyes that seemed to see right through you. She rarely smiled, and when she did, it looked forced, like she had to remember how to do it. But no one thought much of it at first. New teachers are always a bit odd, right? Except Ms. Castor wasn't just odd. She was wrong. The first time I noticed something was off, it was during a pop quiz in her English class. I dropped my pencil, and when I bent down to pick it up, I saw her shoes. Or rather, I saw what was inside her shoes. Her ankles weren't normal. They bent backward like an animal's hind legs. I stared, frozen, for what felt like an eternity before she shifted, and I quickly sat up. My heart was pounding, but I didn't say anything. Who would believe me? "Is something wrong, Emily?" she asked, her voice smooth yet cold. No, I stammered, avoiding her gaze. For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I tried to convince myself that I'd imagined it, that maybe the light had played tricks on me. But deep down, I knew what I'd seen. The next strange thing happened during lunch a week later. I was sitting with my friends, Megan and Jake, when I noticed Ms. Castor standing near the edge of the cafeteria. She wasn't eating or talking to anyone. She just stood there, staring at the students. Her green eyes scanned the room like a predator, sizing up its prey. Then, for a split second, I saw her tongue flick out of her mouth, long and forked like a snake's. I gasped, spilling my drink. "What's your problem?" Megan asked, frowning as she wiped soda off her sleeve. "Nothing," I muttered, my eyes darting back to Ms. Castor. But she was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Those bent legs, the forked tongue, those piercing green eyes. My imagination twisted her features further, turning her smile into a gaping maw, her fingers into claws. I decided I needed proof. No one would believe me otherwise. The next day, I brought my phone to class and kept it hidden under my desk, ready to record. Ms. Castor was reading aloud from some old book of poetry when it happened. Her voice started to change, growing deeper and more guttural. Her skin, pale and smooth, began to ripple, as if something underneath was trying to break free. I hit record, my hands shaking, and then she stopped. Her eyes snapped to mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw them glow. "Emily," she said, her voice back to normal. "Stay after class." The rest of the period was a blur. My classmates filed out as the bell rang, leaving me alone with her. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, the recording still running. "You've been watching me," she said, her lips curling into that unnatural smile. "Haven't you?" I couldn't speak. My throat felt dry, and my legs were trembling. She took a step closer, and I instinctively backed away. "Do you know what happens to curious little girls?" she asked, her voice dripping with malice. Her skin began to ripple again, and this time, it didn't stop. Her jaw unhinged, her mouth stretching impossibly wide to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. Her fingers elongated, ending in claws, and her eyes burned like emerald fire. The air grew thick, oppressive, like the classroom itself was closing in around me. The walls seemed darker, the shadows deeper. I screamed and bolted for the door, but it slammed shut on its own. Ms. Castor, or whatever she was, let out a low, guttural laugh. "No one will believe you, Emily," she hissed. Desperation took over. I pulled my phone from my pocket and threw it at her, hoping to distract her long enough to escape. To my shock, she recoiled, letting out an ear-piercing shriek as the device hit the floor. The screen cracked, but the recording was still running. She lunged for it, but I was faster. I grabbed the phone and bolted out the door, not daring to look back. I ran straight to the principal's office, panting and shaking. "It's Miss Castor," I blurted. She's not human." Principal Turner raised an eyebrow. "Emily, calm down. What are you talking about?" "I have proof," I cried, holding up my phone. But when I opened the recording, all I saw was static. The audio was distorted, nothing but garbled noise. My heart sank. "Emily, I think you've been under a lot of stress," Principal Turner said gently. "Maybe you should see the school counselor." I wanted to scream, to shake him, and make him believe me, but I knew it was useless. Miss Castor had covered her tracks. That night, I locked my bedroom door and barricaded it with a chair. My phone was dead, the battery drained inexplicably. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I heard a noise outside my window, a soft tapping, like claws against glass. The sound came again, more insistent this time, each tap sending a jolt through my body. I didn't dare look. I knew who it was. Her voice came, low and taunting, like a whisper carried on the wind. "No one will believe you, Emily." The tapping stopped, but the silence was worse. It stretched on, thick and suffocating, until every creak of the house felt like her footsteps. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, and my breaths came in shallow gasps. I stayed awake all night, clutching a flashlight and a pair of scissors I'd grabbed from my desk. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. These genuine winter-shocking tales are chilling in additional ways than one. Which one creeped you out the most?